Tonight, Governor Newsom signing into law a new AI regulation.
Newsom and Sacramento lawmakers went back and forth for months over this legislation, which people are calling landmark.
It's called Transparency in Frontier Artificial Intelligence Act. It is the first to focus on the safety of these powerful AI models.
This very week, here in California, Governor Newsom is staring at a new stack of AI regulations that he is considering signing that will alter California's place as the seat of AI innovation. And typically, my last couple podcasts, I've shared some takes on big policy decisions on AI writ large, but this one affects me very specifically in a way that I'm going to kind of let y'all behind the veil of implications for me as an AI CEO, some of the ways that I'm partnering with other convening organizations and lobbyists to speak. I've written my local state senator. I've written to Newsom. I've got an op-ed that's getting published tomorrow. So it's the first time that I've really weighed in this directly because of my purview. Because I've been following what I would call the wins and losses for America's role in the AI arms race, for the role of the builder and the developer, the role of keeping you, me, and our kids safe, which needs to be the number one priority, but also the role that AI can have in unleashing opportunity. And putting in our case, a language tutor in every kid's pocket in a way that most of those kids couldn't afford before. So here we go. I'm gonna share really quick history. I'm gonna dive into what is the state of affairs in the U.S. today. I'm gonna talk about the exact California bill that I am helping shape the decision in the next couple days before Newsom decides to veto it or not. And then I'm gonna end with, like I've been doing, what do I wish our leaders were saying? But here we go. Let's start with broad context is, I'll spout out some of the stats that I share in my VC, my venture capital slide decks, which is when I started Immerse, less than 10% of venture capital was going into AI. This year, it's on track for 70 to 75%. That's $100 billion in investment into little startups. And then you look at the investment from companies like Amazon, Meta, X. They're all in the 60, 70, or $100 billion per year investment rate. It's totally unprecedented. It's so different than my first 5 or 6 years running Immerse. And the regulatory landscape is shifting under there and my feet quickly. Here's the starting point is always Europe. I've cited this before. Ursula von der Leyen, I never know if I'm saying it right, leader of the EU, said proudly that the EU might not export technology, but they'll export regulation. For me, that was the most emblematic statement of what the EU has tried to stand for in a way that for me just feels incredibly self-defeating. So here's my purview. And once again, I'm going to keep this kind of personal. I'm just going to share my first person experience, which is when GDPR passed. All these things are well-meaning. So I'm not going to disparage maybe the altruistic intention, but the implementation has been really, really challenging for all tech practitioners, but especially what I fondly call little tech. I'm not Meta. I'm not Mark Zuckerberg. I got my less than 100 employee count, only raised like $25 million in venture capital. What it means for us is the engineering time to stay compliant in the EU would require all of our engineers to drop what they're doing and just focus on compliance for 6 to 8 months, which is a startup. I can't afford that. That's the equivalent of like $5 to $10 million in investment. It's unthinkable. And as we prep for our next fundraise and grow the sales team, we are addressing every other major market, excluding Europe. How telling is that? for me, it's just, I'm like, I love my European brothers and sisters. I was born there. my sister lives there. Like so many. My sister-in-law lives there. It's the last market we're going to be able to enter. Plain and simple. Because of the compliance overhang. It's too costly. And that's just GDPR, which is like privacy. The EU AI Act came out last year. It's getting implemented. Really, it's going to be fully implemented in 2026. It takes a while to explain it all, but it just places every imaginable risk that AI could cause, which you can tell it's like, oh, these are some think tankers. They just tried to dream up everything and throw it all on a spectrum and classify it by 4 stages and have the commensurate punishment for each stage, basically. And it's things that I like, half of them I hadn't even considered. I'm like, oh my gosh, he has really threw the kitchen sink at this one. But now instead of litigating the complexity that creates for builders and my inability to enter the European market and all of the negative implications there, let's just do the numbers. If I entered Europe and messed up, it's typically $50,000 per infraction, which means like I have heard of other startups getting $30 to $50 million penalties. Another way they put it is, if I understand this correctly, it's like they won't penalize you for more than like 7 to 10% of your annual budget. But I'm like, I can't budget for that. That's insane. It's totally insane. And now what are the downstream effects? Venture capital focused on AI in Europe, compared to even pre-AI, is another 10x less than the US. It's crazy. European companies, only 11% even use AI because they're so nervous. Where right now, the US, China, India, those numbers are in the 60 to 70%. It feels like such a handcuffing, such a like, just an own goal. I could keep going on like, what are the downstream effects for their education and job creation? It's just, for me, it's just a degree of self-sabotage that doesn't make sense to me. Because they're trying to export the largest degree of regulation imaginable. I'm going to keep going. What's this? I'll touch on and I'll circle back to China, which is China actually has a fairly regulated space, but it's all around instilling CCP values, which for me only magnifies the necessity that the US maintains our supremacy in the AI arms race so that CCP, Chinese Communist Party values, aren't distilled globally if their LLMs are better than ours. I can't think of a worse negative like externality or unintended consequence. Crazy. Places like the UK, Canada, Australia, they're towing the line but not following the EU because they're seeing the implications quickly. Now let's get to the US. I'm trying to go quick here. There's a lot I could say, a lot I've experienced in the last 2 years. Biden had a 2023 executive order that Trump scrapped, I'm pretty sure like within the first week of inauguration. And right now they have the NIST framework that is optional because the way they describe it is that they're trying to remain very pro-innovation, which if you listen, you know me, I am pro-innovation for 100 reasons, all that I'd be thrilled to defend. But back to the law of unintended consequences, that has therefore opened up a huge gap for federal agencies to add their rules. Right now, we're just shy of 60. That adds a patchwork of confusing compliance that oftentimes it's rarely coordinated. And then it punts the responsibility down to the states, which that is my nightmare. I could do a diatribe on why, from a social policy standpoint, I'm actually very understanding of why the founding fathers, especially folks like Thomas Jefferson and Madison, advocated for state-by-state regulation. I think that is actually in the best interest of our nation healing on social issues that are easier to regulate and prosecute intrastate. But when it comes to business practices, every state having their own regulations there is a nightmare for folks like myself. I could do, once again, these are all detours I'm just skipping. I tried to tabulate, I spent 40 hours on payroll this year, which I have tried to delegate for 8 years in a row because the state-by-state patchwork is that confusing. And every time we hire a new contractor or a new employee in a new state, it's just, it is a cluster. It's so painful, which means we often just end up having to, we've given up on trying to keep up with what states we're in. And now we just have aggregated every rule in every state. So we're just playing to the lowest common denominator. We're just doing every state, even if we let go someone in a small state. Because it's too much of a headache. It's crazy. It's crazy making. And I hate spending my time that way. It's not my best use. You can get why this is personal for me. Next one down is right now across 47 states, there are 260 AI bills that are either being debated or have gotten passed. Right now, we're just shy of like 25 that have gotten passed, to my knowledge. And here's, I've never heard anyone describe it, but what I'm experiencing is that in a way, we're already at the end of what I will call phase one of AI regulation, which tackles let me count my notes, like the 7 most obvious, low-hanging, bipartisan things to regulate. And the way that it's really easy to tabulate because you just look at how many bills got categorized around anything that's like sexually explicit. And then the really egregious one, which I'm so in favor of, like it's so obvious, is anything sexually explicit around minors. Let's throw the kitchen sink at that. Let's regulate that. Let's make sure it never happens. That's obvious. There have now been 53 bills drafted just around that category, which like everyone agrees with. So we can almost skip that. That's so obvious. Boom. Let's keep going though. There's 33 bills that have been drafted around deep fakes in elections, 31 bills around transparency. It's the idea that when you're scrolling on TikTok and you see a video, if it's AI, it should be labeled. I'm okay with that too. That's not that big of an ask. It doesn't blow up innovation and make every AI founder's job that much worse at all. It's the idea of like disclosing when you're using AI. That's low-hanging fruit. The bills have gotten passed. So let's kind of keep moving because these are the obvious ones. Where it then gets a little more complicated are things that are considered high risk, like audits, how the IRS acts, 29 bills, how federal agencies, how they're allowed to, and in what cases they're allowed to use AI. There's 22 bills. Things around like employability, using AI in hiring, HR, there's 13 bills, and then 12 around our healthcare and privacy and how AI is implemented in healthcare. So you can hopefully understand what I'm getting at. Those numbers, for me, demonstrate the most obvious things have already been taken care of effectively. And if you're a builder, you know how to play by those rules because it's getting legislated left and right, which then means we have effectively, once again, I'm coining this, entered what I would call phase 2, which is the partisan AI regulation, the things that aren't just unequivocal and obvious, the low-hanging fruit. And it always comes from blue states. Colorado is the one that by far is the most expansive, to the point that companies like myself are considering not doing business there because it's the level of compliance quite literally was modeled after the EU. They categorize every possible risk, place it on a continuum in, I think it's like 4 or 5 buckets again, and have complicated rules to follow according to what risk you are encountering as a builder. I'll just jump right to, I'll picture Colorado. It's like, hey, there's a good bit of tech that comes out of Colorado. Right now, already, there's an estimated $5.5 billion in GDP loss, 30,000 tech jobs lost, expected this decade. And venture capital is currently on track to dropping by 40%, which hurts these types of regulations. Oftentimes, the really big companies, they can comply. They've already got policy teams and all these lawyers on retainer. Like it's a little more straightforward for them. Means it's a drop in the bucket. It's like, oh yeah, let's spend 0.1% of our budget on compliance. For us, to spend $500K or $1 million on compliance is a game changer for our business. We ain't doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue yet. And therefore, for me, I now worry of like, oh my gosh, I know a couple founders in Colorado. Doesn't make sense to be there. Hate to say it. Just doesn't. I'm not going to be surprised when they move. And now let's keep going. California is the next one. Where I live, where all my friends live, where Silicon Valley is based. I've tracked like north of 50 bills that are in any way connected to AI in California. And interestingly, I've said this before, I've been trying to call balls and strikes fairly when I see it, and trying not to just play the partisan talk track, because that's just boring, and there's plenty of people doing that. You can tune in there. Governor Newsom has taken a couple intelligent angles to prove that he is still trying to encourage innovation and keep Silicon Valley what it is. There was a big bill last year that you can just imagine. If you're an LLM, if you're that frontier multi-$100 million minimum investment, the level of audits and transparency that the state Senate tried to push last year, and something literally called a kill switch that the government could, in a moment's notice, say, we need to turn you off. Newsom vetoed it. I was impressed. Like in a lot of the news that I follow, it had technologists say like, oh, hey, that was a really pleasant surprise. Thank you. And he created a new commission to investigate better ways to enact the legislation, which also is tactical. And I can get with that. The one that now I'm going to drill in is personal, because it affects Immerse and it affects what I think of for my little baby girl and the world that she's going to grow up in, which is AI for children. Which, if you're like me, your knee-jerk reaction is like, protect them. That's a no-brainer. That's so important. And here, though, let me explain some of the exact language that this current piece of regulation, SB 1064, uses, and I think you'll intuit why folks like me are worried. And it is that they, as a state, want to regulate any AI used by a minor, defined as any engineered or machine-based system that infers inputs to generate outputs, influencing the environment. And if you're a lawyer, I know a couple of friends that listen that are lawyers, can you think of a more broad, encompassing, and confusing statement? I'm like, that's just tech. Like, that's just such a stupid, whoa, wait, what? And then the one that they really want to regulate is the idea of companion chatbots, which once again, I'm like, I can empathize with the well-meaning folks that probably tried to draft this, which is, and they're defining companion chatbots as any form of AI with a natural language interface that simulates human-like relationships. I'm like, well, that's just all AI. That's just all of, like, wait, what? And while, like, early in the legislation, it's to try and curb all the nasty stuff that you would assume. Anything sexually explicit, anything that could harm mental health, anything that could assist in suicidal thoughts, which I'm like, no duh, I'm behind that. But right now, myself and a dozen other like major technology groups, includes the policy team at Meta that I work with closely. It includes some of the major, just like pro-innovation lobbyists on both sides of the aisle, are raising the red flag and saying, when you have that kind of all-encompassing language and you require a whole new form of age verification, audits of your AI, plus punitive damages, 25K fines per infraction, that will directly obstruct my ability to use AI in education as the tutor in every kid's pocket. We've tried to tabulate it already internally, and at minimum, if this gets passed, it adds another $500,000 to compliance, perhaps every year, but definitely for the first year. So again, I think if you're a business owner, it's like, whoa, $500K? That's substantial. Just a new compliance is another one that we got to add. And I'm now like hearing kind of the whispers from ed tech VCs, from other ed tech founders saying like, oh my gosh, I'm about to lose, pretty sure I remember this correctly, the fourth largest economy on earth, California. If I remember correctly, California passed Japan. It's crazy. It's such a huge economy. So the downstream effects, yes, are stifling. It's all the obvious stuff. Stifling innovation. But what I want to advocate is that there will be immediately unintended consequences like the other left-leaning policy I've seen in California, especially when I lived in San Francisco. Here's the example. When I was there, some of my really dear friends had kids in elementary school, and they're like, it's crazy. The public school system removed the honors class, like opportunity. And I'm sure there was someone who thought it was like democratized access, made it more egalitarian. The thing that's hard for me is like, all of those parents ripped their kids out of the public school system and immediately paid the extra $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 a year to put them in a private school. I can't think of anything less democratizing and egalitarian. What an immediate unintended consequence that children with means are now removed from the exact school system and still able to access the curriculum that gives them a quick shot at acceptances to the top colleges. It's just like, oh, that's just so it's so obvious and it's so disappointing. And in the same way, the idea of, I should look up, however many kids are in the school system in California, it's a big number, not having access to all of the empowerment that AI is going to provide for adaptive, personalized learning, tutoring in their pocket, available 24/7, that doesn't hurt the wealthy kid that already could afford a tutor. That hurts everybody else. That hurts me when I was a kid. We couldn't afford around-the-clock top tutoring. I was trying to watch YouTube videos and read SparkNotes. Like, it's such a... It just feels so innately unfair. So here's just all the things that I wish my leaders were saying. And oftentimes it feels pretty simple. And for me, it starts with, what's the obvious stuff? We as Americans want to keep each other safe. And for the love of God, keep our kids safe in every domain. Yes. Easy. And we want to empower our builders in every direction. Construction, tech, you name it. We want to empower our builders. Our lead over China in the AI arms race is shrinking, and we need to widen the lead. We need to invest appropriately. That's what we need our leaders to say. And now, we also need to unlock innovation so that the common man and woman and their kids actually have just as good of a shot as the upper class. Those should be our priorities. It's quick, it's easy. It feels super American. And my fear is that I really enjoyed, and I cited it a lot when it came out, Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson's book Abundance. It was just all over the airwaves. And if I were to summarize my experience reading it, it is that I can't think of a prominent Democrat that actually built a business in 50 years. And the last one I can think of is a peanut farmer named Jimmy Carter. That's not some top AI entrepreneur or technologist. Democrats are lawyers. That's just the connotation. And lawyers legislate, and lawyers brag about what they stopped, not what they started. That's my take. And in order for Democrats to take back the mantle of the common man and actually have a solvent argument about the cost of living crisis, the American dream evaporating for my generation, it's not going to come through more regulation. It's going to come through building and empowering innovators. So with all of those in our mind, I actually do believe there are like tactical solutions. And I'll rattle these off quick, then I'm done. Is, for me, an easy one that Newsom has actually suggested, I'm going to keep giving him credit, is that for the larger the compliance overhang, the larger the revenue minimum necessary for a company to need to qualify or to comply. I mean, a different way of saying it easier is that little companies shouldn't have to abide by all the insane rules that big companies should, because we can't afford it. And stifling little innovation means that you're stifling the ideas of tomorrow and the big companies of tomorrow, Immerse included. I can't afford another 500K in compliance. It kills us. And it gives the big guys more of a lead. Even though we're hustling like nobody's business, we just can't compete. And that's all of my peers. So if anything, I'm like, I would love Democrats that were actually empowering the little guys left and right. There's a lot of ways to do that. Make bidding on government contracts easier, make funding easier. Doge killed our chances at a couple contracts that would have really helped us, like make scientific research easier at universities. There's just so many things that Democrats can retake the mantle that the Republicans have systematically demolished. Empower the little guys and keep us safe from the most egregious regulation until we can actually afford it. For me, that's pretty straightforward. Maybe I'm biased, but I'm like, it seems like that's in America's best interest. And then the last one for me is circling back to our Congress is so disappointing in a lot of ways, but disappointingly gridlocked. They just aren't good at legislating. I'm recording this during a government shutdown. What's more emblematic? What's more disappointing? And by shirking the responsibility of regulating, they require states to fill the void and therefore are complicit in the most confusing patchwork of regulation that makes everyone that's trying to build their life a nightmare. In the Big Beautiful Bill, there was a lot of talk about a 10-year moratorium on state-level AI regulation, and I was wildly in favor because I can't afford another state. Right now, what Colorado did, Illinois and Maryland are fast following. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's two more important states with high GDP that I'm like, who's going to be left? I understand social policy getting punted down to the state level. I don't get it for economic policy and business circulation and innovation. It's in nobody's best interest. So the federal government needs to step up and actually do their job. It's a big ask. I don't know how to I don't know how to change incentives in Congress and the level of division, but that's what we need. And I can say it. So that's where I'm at. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. It's another night where I work all day. I hang out with my little kid and I record this at 10 p.m. again because I care. And my op-ed drops tomorrow. It's at a really cool group called Salon AI. It's in partnership with Meta. They've been I genuinely really like what they're doing. They've been our partners for years and they've been cheering me on, which I'm super grateful for. And a lot of it stemmed from this podcast. So thanks to them for advocating for me, helping me get my voice out there. And ultimately, the folks that I work with there are so well-meaning. This is an unintentional detour, but I for them, it's like, hey, we care about our kids and we care about actually allowing innovation to support them. And I'm so on that train. So I'm like unequivocal in stating that support. All right. Thanks, y'all. Read the op-ed, Quinn Tabor, it's Salon AI tomorrow, and I'll see y'all next week.